Usually, the language that we learn from infancy becomes the language of the heart. And we learn it at home. In most cases, the dominant influence in our life in connection with our language of heart, or the first language, is our mother. And that's precisely what took place in Israel in the days of Nehemiah. But the mothers in this case were pagans, sharing their language and probably their beliefs with their children. And a lot of Jewish men, prominent Jewish men, had married pagan women. Let's read the scripture together at Nehemiah chapter 13, verses 23 and 24. Nehemiah 13, 23 and 24. It says, "In those days I also saw Jews who had married Ashdodite, Ammonite, and Moabite women. Half of their sons were speaking Ashdodite and the language of the different peoples, but none of them knew how to speak the language of the Jews." And as was stated, it's very likely that those mothers would be teaching the children about their land, their culture, and their worship, the pagan gods they worshiped. And so the decision was made by the Jews themselves when they were counseled and given direction from Ezra and from Nehemiah to send those wives away along with the children. And that's an interesting thing. It must have been a bit difficult for some husbands to see their children sent away, but all they knew were the languages of the pagan wives, nothing about Hebrew and the worship of Jehovah God. And the problem was they were sent away to keep the Jews from losing their identity by a gradual assimilation into the cultures and the religions of the surrounding nations that those wives belonged to. In Nehemiah's day, speaking Hebrew was vital. And we're grateful it's not necessary today. We all don't have to learn Hebrew. But in his wisdom, Jehovah invites people who speak any language to learn the pure language, the truth about him and his purposes.
Wasn't this interesting in the context of shunning, in the context of an organization that literally in the last few days, as I'm making this rebuttal, has put out material for its midweek meetings reminding parents of the need to shun disfellowshipped children, of the need to act as though they're dead, of the need to disown them and go against all of their parental instincts. Doesn't this make perfect sense, William Malenfant's words here about Nehemiah and the rules regarding speaking Hebrew and not marrying foreign wives? Doesn't it make perfect sense? What we're having here is Jehovah's Witnesses conditioned to think of family as expendable, to think of children, to think of even spouses here as being expendable when it comes to serving Jehovah. This is precisely the sort of dehumanizing material we can expect here. And I actually commented on this aspect of the Nehemiah story during my rebuttal to the Always Rejoice convention, because obviously they featured the story of Nehemiah in the drama. And I pointed out how weird it was that at a certain point in history, in order to be a worshipper of God, you had to speak a certain language, and you preferably had to be of just one particular tribe or race or culture. That was the requirement then. Doesn't this raise questions, or shouldn't it raise questions? If you are not just a believing Jehovah's Witness, but I suppose even just a Christian in general, how is this a story that should make us respect God? The fact that this was the requirement in the time of Nehemiah, to split up families based on your place of birth, what country you're from, and to split up families based on what language you can or can't speak. We're supposed to respect this. And it's just one of those stories that just doesn't transfer to Christianity. Obviously, at this time in the history of the writing and compilation of the Bible, they weren't anticipating Christianity, were they? They weren't anticipating a new religion built or sort of retrofitted onto Judaism that was suddenly going to say, actually, it's not a big deal which language you speak or which country you come from. Everyone can be saved. The two narratives just simply don't go together at all, do they? Why would God, at a certain point in human history, have such impossible standards for humankind when it comes to worshipping him? Oh, just speak this one language, if that's okay. And then, just a few centuries later, relax those restrictions so that anyone can join. Doesn't it kind of make more sense if the whole thing was just man-made and just a work in progress and just a case of one religion again being merged into another religion, or a new religion being retrofitted over an old religion? Oh, it's just so obvious to me at this point that it's man-made, and I try not to go on about my atheism. But even if you wish to be a believer, and I don't resent anyone who wishes to be a believer or wishes to be a Christian, you have to see the danger in what William Malenfant is doing here, or the very insidious manner in which he is encouraging witnesses to be okay with this, to be okay with families being ripped apart on ideological grounds.